That's a new feature of Zoom. They started putting that notification so you couldn't sneak it. You can't like sneaky record it. Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Dawn Valadez. I'm the director of the Youth and Emerging Media Maker programs at the Bay Area Video Coalition. We're super happy to have, we've been doing this amazing series of workshops during the month of June that the creators, producers, folks who work with Animal Kingdom have provided to us. We're really, really happy to be here. And BAVAC, as some of you know, is a 45-year-old or year-young organization that was started by a group of radical media makers who really wanted to put the tools of media making into the hands of the people. So our focus has always been on increasing the diversity of stories and the diversity of storytellers. And that is what we do today. And we have a number of different types of programs, from preservation. We have a nationally recognized preservation department that protects and supports media video. We do adult training, everything from lighting and camera work to editing and web design. We also have the San Francisco Commons, which is the cable access channel, and which Robert and I both have, one of the person who's going to be hosting this, both had our start in cable access. I actually did some cable access when I was in my early 20s, which was really fun and really got me excited about doing media making. And then we have artist development programs where we work with media maker fellows who are in sort of post-production of their documentary films, feature films, and we support them in the completion of those projects. And then we have my department, which is the Youth and Emerging Media Maker programs, and we run classes and workshops and summer camps for people ages 11 to 25. And we have summer camps that are running right now, which is really exciting. People come in for a couple of weeks or 2 to 4 weeks, work together and make a film during that time period. So they're very intensive. And we also have school year programming. And we have a new project that is in its second year called the Serial Storytellers Program, where we're training young people to write their first pilot and then also and get their first pilot off the ground, basically, for a series. And then also folks who are doing documentary series. So we're really excited about this work, and we thank the California Film Commission for making this Wednesday afternoon panel workshop conversation happen. And so we're super excited to have our guest today. I'm going to let Robert Scott introduce our guest, and then we'll start the conversation.
Hey folks, I'm Robert Scott. I'm very happy to be here because I think what y'all are doing is super cool. I remember those days of student film and self-expressing, and that time is such a time of freedom, of expression, and getting your story out and struggling through those hard days of shooting and cutting, and the frustration of trying to make it what you want to say, but keep doing it. And it's the best experience you're ever going to get. It's really great. I really encourage all of you guys to keep doing it. Recently, I've had the pleasure of working with Aric Avelino, multi-talented writer, director, and a cool guy. And I'm gonna hand it off to him and see what he's got to say. Aric.
Well, just to reiterate what you were saying too, I'm really excited about being here too, because I remember, student film days, and especially like how I first got started picking up the camera for the first time, and just the freedom of that and being able to kind of form my own visual path and all that stuff. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys today. It's just amazing how much stuff you guys that you're doing, Don. It's really great. So I look forward to having a very real, honest conversation with you guys. I'm going to be as straight up as possible about as much as I can. So yeah, I'm excited about it.
So Aric, do you mind telling us a little bit about your start, how you did what was the situation when you did pick up that camera for the first time?
I think someone gave me a camera like as a Christmas gift when I was super young. I think, let me just say, like, I've known I think the first thing I wanted to be when I was growing up was an astronaut. Then I wanted to be a comic book artist. Then I wanted to be a film director. And the only reason I knew that people could actually make things and that there were people making those movies that I loved was because my mom was a food stylist, which means she made food look good for commercials. And she wasn't really in the business, but she grew up. She was like in home economics and then did menu development and just coming up with recipes for different restaurants. And then eventually she got in a position where she could be on movie sets. And I came to visit her one time and I was like, oh, there's people behind the camera. Like I thought movies just kind of appeared out of nowhere. And it's one of those cases truly where if you don't see anybody do something, then you really don't know what's possible. And then, so I've been shooting things just on video cameras and stuff and telling little stories because I grew up as an only child and that was kind of what I did all the time. I wrote little comic strip and comic books and things, and I was always shooting things. And then, yeah, and I got this little camera, it took cassette tapes. It was this old like Fisher Price camera. And I used to shoot things on that. And then what was great is from there, I went to this high school that had this video program, and I played basketball for a couple of years and realized I was terrible. So I quit basketball and I took up this video program, and I took a little video class at UCI down in Orange County, where I'm from. And then in high school, I picked up a camera too. And for high school, we had to shoot for this class, this TV class, we had to shoot 2 videos a week and turn them in. Wow. And that would have to be shot and edited. And I don't mean editing like you guys can do on your computers, like at home or at the library. Like you had to go in and like there was a machine. There was only one machine, and then you put the big tape in, you put the tape in, all that stuff. And so that was the beginning. But what's crazy is, and you guys will probably find this too, but everything I learned from a film language standpoint, I kind of had learned beforehand, just like pointing the camera, even before I took these classes. And so I learned a lot just kind of shooting on my own. I made all these little movies with my boys growing up, like all my friends from when I grew up. And we still have some of those and they're crazy. And then from there, I went on to film school. But a lot of people ask like, oh, do I have to go to film school? And I'm like, look, film school, like anything else, is as much as you make of it, right? Because film school is essentially a hustle. If you think about the idea that if there was a school where I told you 400 people signed up to go to the school, but only 3 people actually ended up doing what they wanted to do out of the school, you'd be like, that school would be shut down. Like if there was a business school like that, it wouldn't be around anymore. And that's what film school is essentially. I say that, but also I loved my film school. I went to Loyola Marymount. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship there, like a leadership scholarship. I got a number of things and I got financial aid. I was able to go there. And there, what it gave me was access to a lot of the resources that it seems like you guys have access through these programs, which is I got to pick up a camera. I got to work on a film camera. I got to edit on film. Like, because I graduated, like I was the last class to edit on actual film. Like I would just string the film. I shot my films on 16 millimeter. I learned lenses. I learned all this stuff. And the only reason I learned it there in that way is because I had access to those things. So while I say film school is a hustle, it's definitely a hustle that I took the most out of. It's like anything else. So like any opportunity that you get, even if you're just PAing on set or anything, it's all on you to kind of take as much from it as they're taking from you. Even if you're hired for a job, you should always continue to be learning that way. And that's how I learned cinema. And the biggest thing that I got access to, which I didn't have at home, which you guys have now, because you have like all the streaming stuff, is in the library, there were all these old movies that I hadn't seen before. And so I rented all these VHS tapes and I watched everything. I just watched a ton of cinema because I love movies. And I was watching like a lot of AMC and a lot of Turner Classic Movies. And that's where I learned storytelling, really, is by reading a lot and by watching a lot of movies. So yeah, that's a very long-winded answer, but that's basically the story.
And then are there discoveries that you made back in the day that still affect you now, how you approach things, how you approach storytelling, the camera, anything like that?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, look, I think that there's a couple things that I always talk to people about, is that like there's that visual language that's really important that you would just learn just by picking up your phone, you know, just by pointing at things. You just learn how things work. If you had to tell a story within your phone without being able to edit, if you had to just do like on Snapchat where you could like stop and start, I'm sorry, like Instagram, whatever, you could start and stop it. and then you could just tell a little story with that, then just doing that, it teaches you a natural visual language. And just to answer that question, I would say I'm always learning things, and I'm always trying things. Like even directing Animal Kingdom, there were things that I thought might work, and sometimes they did, and other times I'm like, it's not work, that wouldn't work. And I think the main thing is I had a foundation of visual storytelling that I just got naturally from watching a lot of movies. And it's crazy how much stuff just inherently. Like the power of a close-up because you saw it work. And there's a couple of different ways to watch. I mean, there's millions of ways to watch movies, but specifically, I watched a lot of things for enjoyment. And then I got to a point where I was like, man, why did that movie make me feel the way it felt? And then I would watch it again and again and again. I was like, oh, he cut from here to here. Like, oh, he did this and this. Or, oh, she did this whole slow zoom thing. Like, it's amazing. And then I would try those same things. Like Spike Lee has this shot where it's on the dolly, and I would put one of my boys in a shopping cart and I would pull them in the shopping cart and I would strap the camera on. Like I would just try all the crazy stuff. And especially like now, like you can do that all the time. And so from a technical standpoint, like my goal was always to try to make a story make sense, but always to make someone feel. But another aspect of this, which I think is really, really important, is that like, I would say 60 to 70% of what I do has to do with how I understand and relate to other people. So storytelling as a filmmaker, you think it's about the camera, you think it's about the sound and the lights and whatever, but essentially, I think the thing that I try to do best is just relate to the people I'm making stuff for, and then also the people I'm working with. And I think that's just so key because, like, to me, there's nothing better than a movie theater because, all of us go to a movie theater, we sit down, we may not agree with the politics to the person sitting next to us. And then 45 minutes in, we're all angry or we're all crying at the same thing. I used to love, when I made my first film, I used to love when it would I would go watch the screenings, and I didn't like watching my own stuff, but I loved going in at a certain moment. I knew I could go in at this many minutes in, and I could walk in and I could see the whole audience go like, I could see them relax because there was this moment that was so tense, and it worked in whatever city. And that's how I knew that it was working. And that was the thing I was most excited about, is that it's like cooking, right? Like you throw in all the right ingredients of stuff, and then you stir them all together, and there's nothing like serving it to someone or even tasting it yourself. And you're like, oh man, that's like the perfect blend of that sauce. And that's to me what cinema is like, it's the ultimate empathy machine. And it was also a vehicle where I felt like I could tell stories about things that only I understood and other people couldn't necessarily relate to. And a lot of the movies that I was watching didn't have people like me, or didn't have characters like my family or my boys, or just people I knew, like my mom, my grandmother. And so I wanted to tell those stories. So there's the two different aspects that I'm always learning from, which is like the technical thing, which you're always trying, but that's just a means to an end. And what's the end for me? It's like being able to tell the unique story from a unique perspective, and really being able to relate to the audience, and then tell that with other craftspeople, like in your cases, like other friends and other students who also have a voice and are also great at things, because all those people will help fill that vision, So yeah, does that answer that question?
Sure. Just to get a little more granular, when you talk about thinking about the people that you're making the story for, the people you're trying to relate to, do you approach a different demographic with a different story? Do you craft a story toward those folks? Is there any more detail you'd like to get into about that?
Yeah, so I think America is really heavily divided, not only along race, gender, and sexuality, but really along class. And my goal always is to try to tell a story that allows someone to see a different perspective. So when I talk about a target demographic, I would say no. Like with American Gun, with my first film, my goal was to make a white person growing up in suburbia by the end of the movie want a black kid in the west side of Chicago to carry a gun because they themselves felt, as a result of the storytelling, that was the only way he could keep himself safe. And then I also wanted like someone in liberal Los Angeles to understand why someone would want to pick up a gun for the first time in Virginia, why this woman who had been sexually assaulted would want to do that. But then also on the flip side, I also wanted like a Black person in the inner city to watch this movie about this mother of a school shooter in Oregon. And by the end of the movie, hope that that kid is never in the room with a gun because of the things that he had experienced as a result of his brother bringing a gun to school, killing 17 kids and then killing himself. So it was really a lot, and it's a big goal to accomplish, but ultimately the answer is no. Like, I kind of go for just empathy as a whole, and I try to choose characters similar to like the ones on Animal Kingdom, but like I try to choose characters who, if you met these people on the street or you saw them, a lot of people wouldn't want to have anything to do with these people. And so my goal is to like bring you inside their world a little bit so that you understand what it's like to be these people or to have to keep these secrets. Because I hope that like even like 10, 15 minutes in, you get a different perspective on what it's like. I just want to pull you out of your body and throw you into somebody else's, you know? And I think that works a lot. Like if I do my job right, and I think honestly, I try to do this too. I try not to, in terms of matters of race, I try not to make things that just speak to white people about Black experiences, because that's silly to me. Like so many stories that we see now being made in Hollywood are about Black people, but even though it's all Black people, maybe in the thing, it's told through a white lens of what the perspective would be on race. And it's silly because while so much of my life does work along that line, it does not define solely what I do and who I am. And so my job is to come up with an interesting enough perspective and show you, like really pull you in a sincere way so that you're not just thinking about yourself the entire time, you know?
Wow, that sounds like you're driven with a very strong passion to express, and it sounds like that story in American Gun is a very heartfelt piece. Can you speak to the steps you went through to develop that story, the script, how you ended up producing and directing it, and lessons you may have learned during that time?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to that. I would say, like, first off, just as a note, my understanding of the world as an empathetic world came from the result that, like, I was a Black kid going to like a mostly white school where I was viewed stereotypically in many different ways. People thought they knew how smart I was or what I was capable of, and they didn't know me. Like the only thing they knew was what they saw on television. And I dealt with that most of my youth. And what ends up happening in that scenario is, in order for you, and a lot of you on this, probably everybody on this Zoom, I don't have to tell you this, but you learn the skills that allow you to adapt. And what you end up doing is you end up knowing your environment oftentimes better than the people who think they know you, because you know yourself. You live in multiple worlds. Like I know the world of my family. I know the world of like the wealthy white kids I went to school with, and I knew like this other world, which was like a lot of these young Black men growing up in the same environment that were very key and very similar to me. And so that's the empathy bug, right? So then when I was looking, I got out of film school and I wanted to I wanted to tell a story that kind of talked about that. And part of the reason I was driven to tell a story about guns in America was because I had gone to visit my grandfather, who lives in a town called Hope, Arkansas, which is the birthplace of Bill Clinton, but also characters like Mike Huckabee. And I went to visit him, and I remember on Saturday, there was like at Walmart, there were all these trucks, pickups parked out, and everyone was in there like fluorescent. And then on the back of everybody's truck, there were just long guns. They were just like firearms and rifles and all that stuff. But it was different because it was very, very different than what we see here in LA. Because if we had had that same thing in LA, people would have picked the guns up and shot each other with it. Like, we just live in a different world. But there was an intense respect for that. And so what I came to understand was, like, America has a very interesting relationship with guns. I'll tell you that some of it centers around white supremacy, but in this particular case, I will say that it is like when I was going to college, one of my boys got a thing that said Silent Night, Holy Night. And it was a picture of his cousin in a barn holding a rifle that was almost bigger than she was. And behind her, a deer was hanging upside down with blood dripping onto the hay in the barn. And that's just their perspective. And now what was important to me was that I wanted to understand that instead of pass judgment on it, because I thought it was interesting. And then what I came to find is that people who are gun owners are not the people that you see on TV with the NRA. Like, a lot of the gun owners I met were like, I don't want kids to have guns either. I want people to have to pass different background checks to have guns too. It is a lethal weapon, you know? And it was that I wanted to explore that. But then something else happened, which kind of set this all off, is I read an article in the LA Times, column 1 on the front page, and it was a mother of a school shooter. And she had this quote, was actually in the movie. She said, I think about the what ifs and the should have beens, and there's nothing I regret. There's nothing I would have done different. And I thought it was interesting that a woman whose child had brought a gun to school and shot other children could make a statement like that. And I wanted to make a movie about that lie, because it had to be a lie, right? Your kid goes to school, kills all these people, and you don't sit back and go, maybe I could have talked to him a little bit differently. And so American Gun is a story about a woman played by Marcia Gay Harden, who 3 years after her son has done this horrible crime, has a son now who is forced to go to the same school that his brother went to, and he looks like his brother. That's one of the aspects. And then another aspect is a Donald Sutherland character who's a gun shop owner who might as well be selling baseball cards, because he doesn't sell guns to kill people. He sells guns to people and gives them an education about how to keep them safe in the community when they're hunting. He thinks of it as sport in that way. And he's a lovable dude. And then lastly, and this was really important, my producer was a guy who I was hoping would be my producer, but I didn't know if he would. He was a guy I went to film school with. His name is Ted Krober. And after we got out of college, he went and taught at the Inner City Teaching Corps in Chicago. And I was telling him about this, and I was like, look, you got to come back. We got to make this movie. He's like, how are we going to make this movie? I was like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. And he says, I'm not going to come back because I have this commitment. I'm going to teach here this is a white dude. I'm going to teach here for 2 years. I said, okay, cool. You do your teaching thing. And the whole time he's telling me stories. And his stories that he told me, little did he know, were making up the Forrest Whitaker character in my film. And it's about Forrest Whitaker plays a principal. My friend wasn't a principal, but Forrest Whitaker plays a principal who in his community, as a result of gun violence and things that have happened, has to be a counselor, a father, a brother, a preacher, a teacher. He has to be all these things. And in doing so, he's not even being a father to his own son because he's so worried about what's happening with the kids at school. And so I had all these kind of stories swimming around. And then I had written a couple of screenplays when I was in film school. My first screenplay, by the way, like I wrote just looking at other scripts and learning the format. And I don't have any software or anything like that. Like I just wrote it in like what's equivalent to be Word nowadays. And then even when I started writing like professionally, I would write by hand first. And that's where I would form my stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how that came about. And then Ted came back and then we were like, let's make a movie. And we're like, well, we're not rich. We don't know anybody in the film industry. So how the hell are we going to do this? And we just hustled. And I would say because I started writing it, but by the time Ted came back, it was kind of like 3.5 years before we got money to make the movie. And we ended up getting $2 million for the movie. And I'll tell you, the way we got it, we did this crazy, like grimy stuff. Like we snuck into a lot of parties. I would sneak into parties. It's crazy. So, okay, first let me say, this is kind of long-winded, but I'm gonna tell you because I think this is kind of the fun stuff. When we first got out of film school, we didn't know anybody, right? So what we did was, Ted was smart enough to hit up anybody we had any close to a relationship with, anybody who had like looked in our direction or anything. We were like, if it was Tinder, we were swiping on everybody, right? And one of the people that we met was two guys who worked at CAA, who had gone to our same school and worked with our same mentor at Loyola Marymount. And she was like, I know these two guys. So we wrote a letter to them. That's how long ago it was. Ted wrote a letter. And the guys both said this: if we like your script, we'll help you. If we don't, well, we can't help you. And we're like, cool. And I had written this script with this guy I grew up with named Stephen Bagatorian, who had won a screenwriting competition. He was my friend from like when I was in 3rd grade, and really talented dude. So we wrote this thing together. We didn't know if it was good. And a lot of times it didn't follow all the rules and whatever, but we thought it was all right. And so we showed it to both of these guys. One of them was in finance. One of them is in talent management at CAA. Creative Artists Agency, by the way, is what it's called. And it's one of the biggest agencies in Hollywood. So we were totally out of our league, but we showed it to these dudes and they were like, this is pretty good. And we were like, yeah, we knew, yeah, it's good. And they're like, okay, let's see what we can do. So the one guy says, let's try and get some financing. How much money do you think you need to make this movie? We were like $500,000, which to us was like, might as well have been $1 billion. And the guy says, well, I don't know. It's a lot easier for me to get you $5 million than $500,000. And I was like, our budget's $5 million. And so it's because there was this idea that if you spent especially during that time, if you spent too little on it, people thought it was going to look terrible. And so we started this long process of like being connected with financiers and stuff. But ultimately, CA was like, we're not sure. But we needed a cast because we needed someone that believed in this thing. And we were able to, man, it's crazy stories, but like Marcia Gay Harden was this Academy Award winning actress who had won an Academy Award for Pollock. And she was incredible. And we decided to go after her. And what we meant by that was we wrote a letter to her manager, and her manager read the script and said, how much is she going to get paid for this? And we told her, and they said, she's like, that's way below her fee. That's ridiculous. But the last time she worked for this little, she won an Academy Award. So let me see what she thinks. So they send it to her, of course, her agent, because there's managers and agents. The agents are the people that look to protect the brand, get them in bigger things. Oftentimes is the case. The manager, oftentimes it's easier because they kind of have the best interest of the artist, whether it be a director or a filmmaker at heart. They have a more personal relationship. This isn't the case with all people, but in this particular case, it was true. And it's often the case with actors. Their manager is like someone who they have a longer relationship, whereas an agent, they switch in and out and they get them those big Fast and the Furious type things so they can get all the money and then do the little movies. That's a very rough version of the truth. But so then the script got sent to Marcia. Her manager liked it a lot. And we had to make what was called a pay or play offer. And a pay or play offer is when you say, look, we are putting this date on the calendar. If we make this thing on this date, you will be in it, right? And the person says, yes. Okay, if we don't make it on this date, you're still going to get paid what you would get paid to do this thing. So just like a quick thing, for example, Denzel Washington was attached to make American Gangster, that movie, when it was with a different director. His rate was $20 million. It was a pay or play offer. They couldn't get the movie together. And so they paid Denzel $20 million not to act in a movie just because he had reserved that time, because he's Denzel, right? And that was it was rate. Ridley Scott comes along and they're like, Ridley, who do you want to be in the movie? He goes, Denzel Washington. So they said, okay, well, we got to make him an offer again. Denzel Washington got paid $40 million for American Gangster. This is what I've been told. If anybody else tells me different, I'd be surprised, but this is the thing. So for our pay or play offer, it was pennies to them. It was like, I think for Marcia, I don't know what it was, but it was in the thousands, but it wasn't a ton of money. It was next to nothing. So this offer was about to expire. When the offer expires, essentially you move on to another actor. And by the way, if you don't know this stuff, I didn't either. That's the whole point, is you kind of learn it along the way. And that's why I'm trying to tell you this stuff. And a lot of this stuff, you feel like it's over my head. I just want to learn how to make stuff. We can get into that too, but I just want to talk to you a little bit how the business works, because it does feel very overwhelming. And these are things that you don't really know. But so anyways, it was expiring, and Ted said, well, why don't you write her a letter and talk to her about why she should be in the film? And I said, everybody's writing letters. I'm gonna make a CD with my voice on it where I say why I think she's a phenomenal actress, why the part is amazing, and why she's the only one that could play this part. So I made this CD, I sent it to her with a CD player, because this is before like MP3s, or maybe that was around, I just didn't know how to do it. And we sent it, and then I also made this thing in Photoshop because I was working at a marketing company. By the way, the whole time I was doing this, I was working all these funky, crazy jobs. And I would go to these jobs like in an accounting office, and I would work all day, then I would come home and write all night. Like I wasn't like some dude sitting around just like I didn't have any money. I didn't have any money when the movie was over. But anyways, I made this thing. I sent this to her in this package, and in it I wrote like about the character. I did all this stuff, just kind of like an outline of what the story was. But this CD player, so she gets the CD. She's on the set of Clint Eastwood's movie Mystic River. And on the way home for Halloween or for something, she was driving back home from Massachusetts to New York. She listens to this thing, and the offer expires, but we're like, oh, we're just gonna have to go to somebody else. And I think I'm out like getting Mexican food with my best friend, and I get this phone call, and the phone call goes like this. It's Ted, and he goes, do you still want Marcia to be in the film? I was like, hell yeah, I want Marcia to be in the film. He goes, okay, I think she's gonna call you. And I was like, she has my number? And he's like, yeah, I just gave it to her manager. So I went home, and I say home, I went to my mom's home, and I just put the phone down and I stared at it, waiting for it to ring. And the phone rang, and Marcia called me. And I picked up the phone, and knowing all that, by this time, by the way, I had read like every book I could find about directing and how to carry yourself. And I had directed a bunch of shorts. I had shot 12 as a cinematographer. For film school alone, I made 3 period pieces. Like I had just shot a bunch of stuff because every time I could, I would. So I picked up the phone and I said, hello. And she says, hi, Aric, this is Marcia. I read your script and I would love to play the role of Janet in your film. And I said, it's great. It's really great. Wonderful. And I said, you know, a lot of the words, we started talking about the script, and I said, a lot of the words are in there. I want you to make them your own. I want them to feel special. And she goes, no. I want to do exactly what's on the page. And it was like the first instance in my like professional filmmaking career where someone empowered me and was like, yo, your voice is in line with what I like. And that spoke volumes. Like that is like, I can't tell you, that's like a nuclear bomb going off inside your heart. It's like enormous burst of energy. So Marcia got on, and she was on for 2 years before we got the movie made, but we were able to touch Marcia Gay Harden. And then the guy who was in talent at CAA goes, what do you think about Forrest Whitaker for this one part? And we was like, absolutely. And they said, well, he wants to mentor young Black filmmakers. Would you be fine with him being a executive producer? I said, absolutely. And then we got Donald Sutherland on because his son was representing our script at CAA. Like all this stuff happened. And then we got more and more actors, and then we had an amazing casting session. We got Amanda Seyfried and Nikki Reed and like Dean Norris. And eventually when this whole thing was done, and I went to college with Linda Cardellini. So I asked her, like, by the time we got all these people together, our film had all these talented people in it. And for $2 million, our movie looked really cheap. Because what they do is, just so you guys know, is like in the movie world, they look at the story and the actors, and they decide if it's financeable. And when I say the story, sometimes it's not even the story, it's like the gimmick. So if I say, look, there's these flying cars that go around space and they do blah, blah, blah. It's like some big concept. People are like, oh, the concept's cool. Things are going to blow up. It's going to be exciting. We don't need big actors necessarily. If we get them, great. But then when I say, hey, I want to make a movie about gun violence in America, they're like, you better have some actors that fit into the indie world that someone knows their name. Now, I didn't have huge actors. I didn't have Tom Cruise, but I had actors that people knew. And they were, yeah, Don's like, what? But a lot of people didn't know these people. They knew their faces necessarily. But to me, I knew they were great actors, and I was chasing that feeling I was telling you about at the very beginning. So we did this, and in the middle of all that stuff, like I said, I would sneak into parties and I would walk up to people who were actors and I would say, hey, like the person who plays Forrest's wife, Garcelle Beauvais Nylon, she was on Jamie Foxx show, but I'd seen her in a couple other things, and I walked straight up to her and I said, listen, I know you don't know who I am. I'm just some dude, and you're at a party just trying to enjoy yourself. But I want to tell you that I would love for you to play a role in my film. And in this movie, there's one scene in there that's unlike anything you've seen on cinema, and maybe nothing you've ever played or read for. And I would love to just, if you just gave me a chance to just read this. And I think it's powerful because you're the only person I could see playing this. She read the thing. 2 days later, she signed on for the thing. Now that's the story of when that worked. There's a lot of other stories where I was asked to stop talking to people, get out of here. Like it was kind of, I had moments. I got thrown out of some places, but it was like, I didn't know any better because I was your age and I was just doing it. Like I didn't have much to lose. Some places I felt like being Black, showing up someplace 6'4", some places I had to walk and be a little tender about it, but other times, I played off of the fact that I was naive about things. And I asked for a lot of favors. And whenever I saved up money at my little accounting job where I was a file clerk, I would use that money to fly to like New York for a meeting where we tried to get fundraising, or drive to Las Vegas. And, I'll tell you, like, I didn't party. Like I wasn't a dude who, I didn't drink when I was in I wasn't drunk. I don't think I was drunk till like 22 or 23 because I was a film nerd. Like I just wanted to make movies, and I didn't understand the point of being drunk until I started drinking. I was like, oh, that's not bad. But I spent most of my life at that time just hustling for this thing that I loved. And so I would rather just sit and watch movies all day and then learn about stuff and then read books about my favorite filmmakers and then watch their favorite movies. And so I had a lot of fun. My boys and I would go out and dance and do all this other stuff. Like, don't trip. Like I had a really good time. But I said the whole like drink things because like I was super focused in a way that I think would be exhausting to me now. I'm old. Like I don't have the same energy that I used to. But so that's it. Like, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think I'd be able to do all those things right now. And you get more scared as you get old. When you're young, you take crazy chances, and that's what it's great. Yeah.
But that's an amazing story of your passion and your passion of expression and a specific expression that you were passionate about, and how you just never gave up and you did risky stuff and it paid off, and like you just kept on trying and it really paid off. And I think that is really a great lesson to pass on to the folks in this chat right now. Just like, never give up and do everything you can think of to get it, to make it happen. And you use every single asset you have. If you need a car, you got your dad's car, you got, like you said, a friend who works at a burger joint and you need some burgers for that scene, or there's those burgers right there.
Yeah,
whatever it is, take that old paint from the garage and paint that set. Whatever it is, whatever it takes to get it done. If there's any questions or comments from the gang, please speak up. You can put it in the chat, or you can come on and raise your hand, and we'll happy to address any questions or ideas that you want to touch on. Dawn, anything that you'd like to bring up at this point?
Well, this is just, I love this. It's so exciting to hear your process. And I think you're right. Like that's you have to have that kind of like hunger and tenacity, right? To do this, regardless of where you live or where you're from or anything. I would love to know, like, well, two things. One, I really like this comment you said, like, kind of about I think often for people of color, we get kind of pigeonholed into like, you know, as a Latina filmmaker, I often feel like I get pigeonholed into making films about Latinos. And while,
Yeah.
of course, that's super important to me and my community is important, and that's one of the reasons why I got into documentary filmmaking in the first place, that's not the only stories that I want to tell or I want to explore. And I'm just curious how you've dealt with that. Like, has that happened to you where people have kind of pigeonholed you or wanted you to do something? And then how have you like addressed that in your career and in the kinds of projects that you've explored? And I remember American Gun, and I have to say I didn't see it when it came out, and now I'm like totally want to see it. And I feel like it is so timely. It is such a timely film. Let's get a reboot. Let's get it out there again.
Yeah,
But yeah,
unfortunately, it stays timely, sadly, like a lot of the gun
horribly.
issues.
Yeah, horribly, but I love your approach to it. Sounds great. But yeah, tell me a little bit about how you've dealt with that, like being kind of, you know, if you've been put into.
Yeah, I mean, I would say not dealt with, deal with. I mean, it's
Yeah.
every day. It's the rest of my life. I will tell you, just like on anything, when I step onto a set nowadays, and people don't know me, like I'm on a TV show, I get compared to the last black dude who was there, just always. But that's something we all were used to. You know what I mean? Like I knew from a very early age, like I represent my family every time I step out. I represent the black community every time, and that's some BS burden that other people don't have to carry. But it's also one that I carry. Like it's just what you do, and it's you rep where you're from, you rep your family, you rep like your ethnicity, all that stuff, and do it. Like it's a lot of pressure because you're like, man, I want to be able to act up every now and then. I want to be able to have fun. I don't want to be like, but you know that I know that well, here's it's hard to say that without saying this. My grandmother marched with Dr. King. My dad was the first to integrate his high school. And my mom was a woman who was told she would be nothing but a seamstress, but now like when I was a kid, she started her own business. And that's just who I'm from. So like when people try to put me in a box and slot me into something and they think they know me, I can't act like my challenges, and like, you know, like my therapist says, like, I don't have to, by the way, you get WGA insurance, you could like get like Writers Guild, you could get like, you get acupuncture, you get chiropractors, you get therapists, you get all the stuff, and it's all really affordable. Anyways, I can go to the doctor whenever I want. When you don't have any money and you're trying to make a movie, healthcare is like, I didn't go to the doctor because it's America, right? That's a whole nother story. Sorry. So, point of what I'm saying though is that like, and this psychiatrist says like I should not downsize my struggles and the things that I have to do with in comparison to what my ancestors and my forefathers did, because it matters. But it's really hard for me not to look at these things and go like, all right, this person only thinks that I could write movies about Black folks who get out of prison and turn their lives around. I'm going to show them I can do something else. Not that those stories aren't important, but there's enough people telling those stories. They don't need me to tell them. I mean, I've pitched for those stories when I think they're intriguing. But you ask how I deal with it, like, it's the same thing a lot of us are told on this Zoom, or like that we've heard before, which is you just got to try to work harder than everybody else. Because I'll tell you, no one wanted to give me money for American Gun. People don't want to give me money now. It's hard enough for other people to get money, let alone like this Black dude who, at the time, I was 25 years old, walking into a room going, can I have $2 million? People are like, who are you? You know what I mean? And like, I was still wearing baggy pants, and like, I wasn't, you know, I was still that dude listening to Wu-Tang. But it is a constant issue. I have to talk to my managers about it all the time. I have to talk to my agents about it all the time, because the stories now, everyone's like, it's a more diverse world. No, people just want to tell more stories that still appeal to white audiences that just happen to have Black characters. And what's great is more voices like you guys here are getting more opportunities to tell your stories. So the people of the LGBTQ community can tell their story now because they've been empowered by somebody else. And then they can tell the story in a way that's genuine to them. And the same thing goes for me. So how do I deal with it? A lot of times I sit in meetings where people think that they know me, and then I pitch something out of the blue. And I'm in writers' rooms where I don't know what people know about me or what they assume about me, but I know that I've lived a life that's been full enough where I could write for all different kinds of characters, because I've had to be vulnerable. I've been embarrassed. I've failed. I've had a lot of those things happen to me, and it makes me understand a lot of the characters. So I don't feel like there's anything I can't write. I struggle with comedy sometimes, oftentimes, but like, I think I'm capable of writing a lot of stuff. But I will say, I do think it is my responsibility to round out my experience. And it's tough because it's like what you're saying, Don, like you have an obligation where you want to tell stories about your community and you wrestle with that. Because like, I also want to be able to make this other thing. I also want to be able to make my sci-fi thing. I also want to be like my cop thing, or like, I want to be able to tell those stories. And it's an internal struggle. And I honestly, I don't know how to necessarily reconcile that, except that no matter what I do, it's always uniquely myself and my point of view. There's always, it has to carry that honesty that goes back to the roots of my grandmother and my mother and my father and all that stuff, you know. It's just how it is.
That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
And in your the breadth of experience that allows you to speak to these different stories, can you touch a little bit on your experience in television? You know, we talked about some about your film background. Talk to us about what you're doing in TV and how you got into that situation.
Yeah, so man, there's some things that I want to be able to share like with everyone from like a craft standpoint, and maybe we'll get into that later, but really a lot of it for television is a lot of preparation. By the time I came on to Animal Kingdom, I had watched 35 episodes or something of the show, maybe more than that, of the show. Because, I mean, it's like, it's a blueprint that's laid out for you, right? And so I could learn the barriers of the show and the language. And what I really loved about Animal Kingdom in particular was that it was a visual style of storytelling and a storytelling within the characters that I really gravitated to. Characters that exist within the gray. They're not good guys, they're not bad guys, they're somewhere in between, like all of us really are. And it sought to humanize all those people, even when they were doing things that we didn't necessarily agree with. And the camera moved in a way that complemented them as well. When I came on, Nick Kopis said to me, he was talking to me about like directing it as a character study that's an independent film with often thriller horror tendencies. And what he meant by that wasn't like not make it a slasher movie, but there's something about that tension that exists intently within horror films that are also synonymous with like Hitchcock films and like a lot of those like old horror movies, right? And so, and thrillers and things. And so for me, I watched as much of that as possible. And then I would go back and I would watch the TV show and I would break down where the camera was in different shots and how many setups they had. And so I basically had a blueprint for the show in the show itself that I could analyze. And then I also studied the characters, like what would I do with the character arcs if I was in the writer's room, right? Where are they fragile? Where are they strong? And just television this is how I got into TV. I wrote American Gun. I had a crazy thing, which I think is important to say. I wrote American Gun, and then after American Gun, I was kind of worn out. By the time I was at the end of American Gun, I was having to sell my CDs so that I could pay for gas money to go to the writers or to go to the editing room. Because for that movie, I got paid around $16,000. And I normally don't say that when things are being recorded, but I think it's important to say now because like, it's not like the movie made a lot of people rich because it didn't make a ton of money. It's kind of a bit of a dodgy thing, but because our film was released streaming at the same time it was. And so like you go on IMDb, it says it made this much money, but in truth, it was also playing video on demand and making some other people money in that case. But I say the money thing because at the end of it, I got paid. Someone offered me money to write a script. And the money I was offered to write a script was more money than I had ever made for one thing in my life. And I took it, and I was really excited about it. And I got really, I realized, and then the scripts that were being sent to me were some of the stuff, Don, like you were talking about, it was some of the same BS about like stereotypical Black characters. And I was like, I don't want to direct this unless I can rewrite it. And I had these stories I wanted to write, but I realized I had spent so much more time writing stories for other people that I wasn't writing the stories that were uniquely about me. And then I looked up and I started getting less and less directing offers. Then I was directing commercials. And then I was directing, like, I was gaffing, I was lighting, I was doing grip work because I just love being on set. And my friends were filmmakers too. And I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to do everything. And then I looked up and time had passed and I hadn't directed anything in years that wasn't a music video or a commercial. And so I was like, man, I want to get back into this game. And so the only way I knew how to do it was to write myself into it. I consider myself a director who writes, not necessarily a writer, because writing is the most painful thing creatively I've ever done. It's really hard for me. I think I'm okay at it, but it's, you know, people tell me I'm okay at it, but it's tough. So what I did was I was fortunate enough to get a manager. That's a long process, it's a whole nother conversation, but a friend hooked me up with these people. But by the time I sat down in front of my manager, I had made a movie, I had all this other stuff. I had written these screenplays and I had all these screenplays, I laid them out and I was like, look, you'll never have to find work for me. I'll always be able to generate my own work. But I'll tell you what work I'm looking for. Maybe you can find it for me. Because what I had learned between that time when I'd stopped working was that no one's going to help me. It's like the beginning. No one's going to help me. I had to make it all myself. But then I found people who liked my work and they actually wanted to help me. And one of those is my manager, my two managers. And they submitted me for something called the Warner Brothers Workshop. And the Warner Brothers Workshop is a program where they allow you to direct an episode of television after you've gone through this training seminar. That is taught by two incredible television directors, Mary Lou Belly and, wow, I can't remember her name right now. Oh, Robert, do you know? Wow, it's so terrible. I can't, because she's genius. Anyways, they had directed over, this is gonna kill me. They had directed over 300 episodes of television and between them. And they taught me basically how to direct for TV. And it was so different than directing for cinema because there's a whole different power structure, which is just different. Sorry, I'm looking this up because it's very important to me that I say this. This book, which is like the, wait for it, Bethany Rooney, of course, who's just an incredible talent and a great teacher. Sorry, Bethany, for forgetting, because I owe a lot. Anyways, I went through this workshop, and although I knew how to direct, I thought I knew how to direct really well. I learned a whole lot about directing television because it just works different. And as a result of that, I was given an episode of Blind Spot to direct. And what was funny about Blind Spot is I showed up and everyone was concerned whether I was going to make my days. In television, the whole idea of making your days is you have to get all your shots and everything done in this time period because you don't really have time to reshoot it necessarily. You probably won't. So you have to get everything. So if you got 5 scenes, well, if you have 3 scenes to shoot in a day, you got to get them. But I had come from independent cinema where I had to do crazy stuff. And I did this other film called Behind the Movement, in which I told a period piece about about Rosa Parks and the time before the Montgomery bus boycott. And I did that, I made that movie in 14 days. And people were like, they were like, well, do you think you can handle this TV show? And I was like, I made a period piece in 14 days. Most movies take months. I got this. And our budget was 800, I'm not supposed to say this either, but like, it was like $800,000, a period piece. And I was like, I could do this, let me do it. And someone believed in me enough to do it, Rebecca Windsor at Warner Brothers and a couple other people. And Mark Garrow for Blind Spot, the showrunner of Blind Spot. And they gave me an episode and I did the episode and I really enjoyed it. I had a really good time. And then I got into a television writer's room as a result of the writing that I did. And I got into the Sundance. it's just a lot. But there was a Sundance Lab, there was a competition called the Sundance Lab where you enter your television pilot, and then they pick people. They pick 10 people out of like 3,000 offers that they get, or submissions that they get. And I was fortunate enough to get picked. I had written this TV pilot. From that, I met all these incredible people, including Lena Waithe, Graham Yost, Chick Egley, just so many incredibly talented people who made some of the best television ever. And I got a job in the writer's room, but then I hadn't directed for a while. And I told my manager, I was like, I need to be directing because that's what I want to do. And I was fortunate enough to get an episode of Animal Kingdom. It's really, I'm talking a lot and I feel bad about it. It's just my story. Like I'm 43, so it took a lot to kind of get to all these little points, especially after I had success at like 26. There's a lot in between them. So.
Well, I think,
it's awesome. It's awesome. Please don't apologize. This is exactly
It
what we
sounds
need to
crazy. I'm
hear.
all over the place. I'm
No,
sorry
we
about
need
that.
to hear this. This is the trajectory, and we want to inspire people because it is. Yeah, I mean, we have, one of our young serial storyteller folks says this is amazing. It's like, this is what we need to hear. We need
Thanks,
to hear the
Elizabeth.
trajectory. We need to hear the pathway, because everybody's pathway is different. Your pathway is your pathway, but it has some insights. And I put some things in the chat, the things that you talked about, the workshops, the labs, those things, so that people can research that stuff. But Robert had a question.
Well, what I like about hearing about your process is how, you learn from watching, you learn from breaking things down. From when you're doing the features, you were watching features. When you started to look at TV, you watch TV and you uncover the template, as you say. And I've always felt like, I heard about a class in college called screen literacy, where people break down what is actually going on with the camera, with the story, with the time period, whatever it might be. Can you explain some of the mechanisms that you're looking for? What are those guidelines, those train tracks that the TV show's running on?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I do watch a lot of stuff, but the main thing is like, that was always really important to me, and that was to make it my own, right? Because we're all creative people. But I will tell you, like, you think you're going to be the first to do something, watch a lot of things, and you realize that almost everything has been done already. What hasn't been done is your unique perspective from a storytelling standpoint, your perspective, because that's unique to you. Just by being born on this earth, you are unique. You have things that tie into other stuff. But although I watched a lot of stuff, it was very important for me to develop my own style. And a lot of that was based on other people's style and take it from other stuff. But a lot of it was just because I picked up a camera and I knew that like, for example, Michael Mann did this thing in The Insider where Russell Crowe's walking out of this place where he works and he's feeling anxiety because he feels like he's about to expose this thing. And they put the camera right over his ear, and you see just his ear in focus and the rest of the background's out of focus. And what I learned from that, and I felt something, right? I watched the movie and then I watched it back and was like, oh, I felt something. And what I felt in that was that, oh, you don't need a close-up of someone's face in order to empathize with them. You could see a piece of their ear, you could see a fingertip, you could see something that makes them human. Sometimes it's just the way that someone's playing with the tail of their shirt that makes you feel connected to them. So I took that lesson and then I applied it to other things. And I started working with like a lot of long lenses where if I would just see a bit, like if I could see someone's hand in focus, but their face out of focus in the background, I would be curious about what the face was. And I loved that, like, for example, Hitchcock does this thing that's so great in his movies. He does this thing where I'm at my friend's house right now, so I'm gonna do this thing. So there'll be this conversation where Hitchcock will be like talking to someone right here, and they're saying, look, I'm gonna go over there and I'm gonna find out everything we need to know, which is essentially everything the audience wants to know, but he's talking to this other character. And he goes, okay, so here we go. We're gonna go over here. I'm talking over here. Okay, so I just found everything out. And as an audience member, you're like, what the hell? He didn't take the camera over there. he didn't take the microphone over there. I don't know what Cary Grant just said, but what's great is it's a thing that happens where as an audience member, you lean in because you can barely hear it. You're like, what? And he gave you enough where it would be like, where he's gonna take it. And you'd be like, what? But that leaning in made you want to watch the next scene even more. And so when I write and I direct, I kind of do things from the same standpoint. And Animal Kingdom is actually a show like that that plays a lot with voyeuristic ideas. And so I love it because you guys all know, like, people watching. Like, if you go sit out somewhere, you could just sit, like, imagine if you were to go to like Union Square solo, because this is the thing I used to do in Christmas time, because I got family that lives in Oakland and in El Cerrito, and my best friend lives in San Francisco. Even though I'm a Dodgers fan, don't no one hurt me for that. Proud Dodgers fan. But I would sit in Union Square, and I would watch people in their interactions, and there was all these little stories playing out, and it reminded me of a movie called The Conversation, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, which you should all see. And what happens is the less you can hear, the more your mind goes. Think of it like a book. By the time you're done with a book, you see what the faces are, even though you've never seen the faces of the people, because it's not a picture book, right? You can read some literature, you can read James Baldwin, and you could see the characters and feel all the stuff. You're like, oh, I think he had a blue coat on. You thumb through the thing, you realize he never said he's wearing a blue coat. Your mind does the same thing with the camera, with conversations, when I show it from afar and from a distance. You start filling in the blanks. What's even more exciting is I play with what you think in this space, and then when I close the space and bring you in, I can reveal something new to you that you didn't maybe even expect, right? And so these are kind of the things like that I play with. I see someone shouted out Oakland. Oh, that was Don. Yeah. That's the big ups to Oaktown. Spend a good amount of time up there. I do support the A's though. But so yeah, I mean, those are some of the techniques, but basically I watch stuff and then I just go try things, and I try them with my phone. Like, to be honest, like my fiance and I, like, I'll say, hey, can you stand over there? I just want to do this thing. And I want to try it. Let's see if I can shoot through this car window and it looks cool. And there's a line that I always walk, which is, you could shoot everything that looks cool. You could make like a Michael Bay thing, and it looks really great and action-packed, and it's a lot of fun. And then you could shoot the shot that you feel best gets to the emotions of the characters, right? Sometimes you find a way to do both at the same time. I think in the past I've made the mistake, and I would even say this about American Gun. I became so analytical with getting the shot that I thought would make someone feel the most, that I restricted some of what was happening with the actors on the screen. So what I've done now is I've loosened up a little bit and let the actors kind of dictate what that is, understanding the intent of a scene. And I'll tell you, like, when I get a script as a director, I go through the script and I break down the intent of all the characters. When I say intent, it may say someone will get home and they'll say, someone will, a husband was making a meal for his wife. His wife walks in the door. The husband says, how was your day? The wife says, fine. That could go a million different ways. So if I say, what if the wife just found out that the husband was having an affair? Or what if the wife just lost her job? What if she had a miscarriage? Like all of these kind of things. What if the husband is in a bisexual relationship? How does he ask that question? How was your day? What if someone's hiding in the closet? All these things. It changes the intent of how a line is said. It goes from like, Robert, did you feel that?
No.
We just had an earthquake.
I thought you were acting.
No, it's crazy. That's crazy. All right.
Wait, where are you right now?
I'm like in just like West LA.
Other people felt it. Look they're like, was that acting or real? Oh my God, I felt it. So we've got some LA people there.
Oh yeah, I was like,
crazy.
Something just happened. It just shook the spot. Anyways, like we do as Californians, we just keep rolling.
Keep rolling.
It changes everything, because fine is one word, but it could be said a million different ways. I'm not an actor, so I can't do it. But like, once I find that intention, then I can shape the scene a certain way. And what I love doing is, because good writers do it, so I think directors should work to do it, because actors are doing it too, is finding the arc within the scene. It starts off that they want to keep the secret, but then maybe the husband wants to reveal that his lover's there by being even overt, you know, like, so you just find whatever that is. And so I analyze every line. I look at all the action lines and I try to find the story within it. Then I have those conversations with the actors. On Animal Kingdom, it was great because like the actors all wanted to have those conversations and not all actors do. So it was really a blessing. Like it was a really great squad to work with, and the crew was helpful in those kind of things too, because you can have, I can talk to Anthony, the cinematographer, about the intention of the characters and how I want the camera to feel that. And then he'll come up with a shot that does that perfectly, you know? The greatest thing about filmmaking is the fact that you get to work with people who have worked so hard to do this one particular thing, and now they're doing it and they love it and they're an expert. So imagine like going to the Mac store and finding the best employee, like working with the employee of the month every single time, right? Imagine going to a school and getting the best teacher every single time. You go on a flight, it's the best pilot, like all of your Uber drivers, the dude who's 5 stars, all that. That's what filmmaking at this level is. Now look, I've worked on a lot of things where that wasn't the case, and it's tough. It's really tough. But when you're working on a show like Animal Kingdom, what's dope about it is that you show up and like the production designer, the props person, the sound person, like they're all top level. And it's great because it allows you to just be good at what you do, which is like guiding that ship, you know? Because I've worked on things where I've had to use the fact that I've done all these roles, like where I've had to say, hey, actually, can you move the light here and then focus it in a little bit more? In fact, replace that tweenie with the 1K, and then could you put, you know, 250, like whatever. I've had to do that. But I think that goes to a larger lesson too, which is anybody who thinks they want to be a director but doesn't want to try all of these other roles, you're playing yourself. Because unless you're some wealthy person who can hire the best crew ever, your job, I believe, as a director is to understand, at least have some knowledge of all the roles that go into filmmaking and to try as many of them as you can. Try mixing sound, you know, try holding a boom, try building a set. All these things you got to do, because then it helped develop my language for how I talk to people. I learned to talk to a composer because I have friends in bands. And so I could say, like, could you make that sound a little bit brighter? And I realized I could talk to a composer in the same way that I would talk to a lighting technician. They use similar languages. And that's what you do. And that's something we all do, right? Like everybody on the Zoom is, we learn the language. We're able to adapt to the language of the group that we're in, so that I can walk into a business meeting and talk to someone about numbers, kind of. And then also walk here and talk to the actors, and I can handle all this stuff. You know, like I can operate inside these worlds. It's how we're built as often as people of color, as women, like all this stuff. Like these are skills that we've had to develop just to survive. But yeah.
One thing I always found.
Oh no, I was trying to remember the question. I was like, oh.
Well, one thing I always found was missing in film school was how to approach actors, how to deal with the people that were on screen. We're always taught, oh, this is what a camera does, this is how you're going to cut it, this is what you're going to use to light it. But what about the person on screen? Can you give any sort of tips and suggestions? I know I knew one guy who he would act and direct, and when he would act, he would read books on how to direct, and when he would direct, he would read books about how to act, so he could put his mind in that other perspective.
Yeah, I took several acting classes. I performed Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead on stage, and I knew I was doing this thing for a month. I think my boy's coming home. Sorry. You can come in. It's all right. But hi. Thanks for letting me be in your home. Sorry guys. And I knew for a month that I was going to say these lines, and I really didn't know how to act, and I didn't know the lines all the way up until the fact that I went to our teacher and I was like, look, I don't know any of these lines. I don't know how to do this thing. And then when I got on stage, the lines just came to me and I was able to live in the emotions of it. I had such anxiety about all of this. And it was important for me to feel that, because as a director, you take for granted the fact that these people are bearing their soul and they're embarrassing themselves and they're trying things as you're asking them to do them without knowing what you're going to ask them to do. So it's a few things. It's being empathetic of the people who are in front of the screen, knowing that your project does not exist without their talent. They are incredibly valuable, but also you have to be able to express your ideas through those people using their tool, right? And so you have to find the language that allows you to communicate with them that empowers them to take what your ideas and your vision is and turn it into something that is their own. Because if they don't make it their own, it feels false to me. I think the only way that good performances work is if the actors themselves have just a personal understanding of the thing that they're playing. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not an actor. These are just things that I'm saying. But I think you take those acting classes, you try it, you embarrass yourself, you realize how tough and terrible it is. And then when you step on set to give an actor notes, you realize that they're a human being and they're fragile and they're just trying to do their best with this particular line. And hopefully what ends up happening is you create a relationship where they feel like they can lean on you as someone who's watching this performance, and they could say, am I doing it right? Like, how was that for you? And they trust that. Oftentimes, there's a thing that this director, Tom Wong, or not Tom Wong, can't remember his name, sorry. But there's this one director who told me this, which is really great. He said, look, from the time you get up from the director's chair to the time you walk to the actor, you better figure out what note you're going to give. So, you watch in the movies and it goes, cut, moving on. And then you go on to this next thing. Well, no, it doesn't work that way. From the moment I say cut, if I'm going to ask for another take in that space, even if it's 5 steps away, I got to figure out what I'm going to say to them in an exactitude, like in a way that helps them give a better performance. And I have to be confident about it. Because if I don't know what I'm doing, they're not going to trust me to watch them and know their performance. And when you're working with an actor like Donald Sutherland, for example, you better come with the correct note. You better know craft. And really what I'm looking for as a director is whether I felt something. And did I feel something? This is all these factors. Did I feel something because I'm on a big time movie set sitting across from this actor? Did I feel something because the camera was in the right spot? Or did I feel something because it was an authentic moment that spoke to this particular character in that way? And it's hard to get rid of all the BS and just focus on that. But what actors want you to do is focus on that so that you can give them genuine notes. And sometimes it's as little as just, can we turn it up a little bit? Now, if you've had conversations beforehand, it's easier to say things like that, or let's just turn it down. And when I say turn it up or turn it down, it depends on whatever's happening in the scene. A lot of times what I like to do, for example, in American Gun is I like to perform the scene first at like the highest, screamingest, wildest level. And then the second take, I wanted everyone to talk in this voice, but with the same intention of the scream. And what ends up happening is when you can't yell and you have to communicate with someone like this, the amount of rage and frustration that comes out in that, I think makes for an interesting performance. Now, these are like tricks and tips and things that you just kind of like figure out. And good actors don't necessarily need those. And some good actors do. But like, I always like playing with the scene. Number one, I know my intention, so I'm always aiming at something. But I like playing with the scene because what ends up happening while you play with the scene is an actor may do something that you didn't even think of. And directing is the most humbling thing you'll ever do. Because just when you have a plan and you think it's all working right, something else comes along that's a better idea. You have to be able to adapt. So in terms of working with actors, just overall, it's important that you respect them and what they do, but you also have to be very strongly opinionated. You have to know what you want, and you have to be able to communicate what you want very clearly. And if you don't know, maybe you should have prepared a little bit more, but oftentimes you do find yourself on set and you're like, what the hell, what is this scene about? And you have to find a way to dial it in. I don't care if you move your chair back a little bit further so that the walk is a little bit longer. You have to find a way. And oftentimes if you listen and you just watch the scene, you'll find it. And here's another tip too. If you're not getting the performance that you like, because I've worked with non-actors too. If you're not getting the performance that you like, move the camera. Now that doesn't make the performance better, but just the process of resetting the camera in a different place gives everyone a breath of fresh air. And it allows you some thinking time. It allows the actor to feel different, to loosen up. Maybe they walk over to a different spot. But these are like things that just in that reset allow you to maybe draw something new out, you know.
But that's amazing. I hope everybody's taking notes, because these are some extremely useful tips, very practical tips, and some probably deep secrets of the directing craft that are being revealed right here on this Zoom. Just to kind of flip it a little bit as we move into the second half of the session.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd like to speak to the folks who are working on pilots? How to develop a story, make it their own, how to write it, revise it, shape it, pitch it, and move it forward toward production?
Yes. Always write for the thing that's most personal to you. When people say write what you know, it's a phrase, I mean, I'm sure if you haven't heard now, you'll hear it a lot. When people say write what you know doesn't mean write a story about exactly you. It means write to the sensibilities and the emotions of the things that you feel on a day-to-day basis. So that every character has that, like every character in American Gun is me, right? Like I'm not a brother of a school shooter, but I've had moments in my life where I felt trapped and abandoned and forced into a situation that was out of my control. And so when you write, hopefully you're choosing stories that are that. Look, I'll say this about everything that I'm saying. I can only speak from my own experience. Someone else will tell you something different. I think it's important to dream, but I also think it's important that you approach things from a personal level and original level, so that if I looked at this, I realized that this is the only person who could have made this. You're the only person who could have written this story. So as you approach your pilot, you have to ask yourself, what's the point in writing something that someone else has already done? Because I'll tell you, whatever you're writing that is like something someone has already done is a lot better than you'll write it. There's better writers than you out there. I think about this every day. There's better writers than me all the time, everywhere. And just within a 1 mile radius, there's 100. But the thing that I bring that's unique is just my own perspective. And so I try to infuse everything with that. And that helps me, I think, with my writing, because it makes it personal and unique. So here's the basics, I believe. Understand format, understand story, look at story arcs of television shows. This is supposed to happen here, this is supposed to happen here, this is supposed to happen here. And then once you understand the fundamentals of it, then experiment with it. You don't have to do it how everyone else did it, but you should understand what those fundamentals are. Because those fundamentals have worked, doesn't mean that that's what the future is going to be. But you should know them just as a jumping off point. You know, when you go to build a house, you want to know what the blueprint is first, and then you could build something like what we have down here is like Walt Disney Hall. Like you could do something that's a little bit strange. And it gives you, I think there's something about knowing the rules that gives me freedom, a lot of freedom. And so I would just say be personal. And I think that's the thing that the Sundance Lab looks for too. The main thing I would say about writing is 2 things. Travel, right? I don't mean fly to Paris, because not everyone can afford to fly to Paris. When I say travel, I mean like go to Fresno, go to Bakersfield, go to Tiburon, go to all these places and just sit around, look at people, make a day trip of it, go get coffee somewhere, right? And also, if you can't do that, ride the bus. I rode the bus a lot. I learned so much about people just riding the bus around LA. I had a job where I used to ride the bus 2 ways, 2 hours, both one way, right? So I spent 4 hours on the bus for a job where I would work 7 to 8 hours. And it was crazy. It was a crazy day, but I watched people and I learned about people. Another thing is read. If you can't um, afford to buy the book that you want, go to the library. They have the books. I still go to the library all the time. I write in the library. I was writing in the library yesterday. I'll probably go there. Library's open until 9. So I'm going to go there after this and write. And so you can pull any book off the shelf. And what's great is, like, back when I didn't have any money, I would go into Barnes and Noble back when those were around. I would go into Barnes and Noble and I would pull a classic off the shelf and I would just start reading the page. And then I would hide it. I would dog ear it, and then I would hide it behind the other books. And then I would come back like in a few days or in a week, and I would keep reading the book. Now, I got like halfway through a lot of books and didn't finish a lot of them. But what ends up happening is you learn language and you learn how to say what you feel by looking at how other people said it. Now, you may not say it how they said it, but you'll realize that, like, oh, like I love reading pulp novels. When I say pulp novels, I mean like detective stories that are like 100-something pages, because these guys write in this, like they said, like Bill had a face like a swollen onion, and you're like, oh, that's good, right? And so you take those things and you just, oh yeah, oh, I can compare him to food, right? Like I compare my actor to his face to food, like it just teaches you how to expand that stuff. And so yeah, I don't know, I think that's writing is about travel and like mainly getting new experiences, again, like even if you're just riding a bus through your town, and then reading. The more you read, the better. I'm a better writer when I'm reading. And read magazine articles, because people are forced to write short, their big ideas really short. So yeah, read random stuff like that. There's a lot of like articles in Vanity Fair that don't necessarily appeal to me, but I love reading it because I love the writing. I love how they describe the people, you know.
And interestingly, movies are developed from stories out of the New Yorker,
All the time.
Vanity Fair. Yeah, it's
Yep.
crazy. So let's say you wrote your script, you wrote your pilot, and now you got to pitch it. What's your pitch? Any tips on pitching?
So before I got here, the reason I'm sitting in my friend's house now is because we just pitched a story to an executive, and it was about it's a black police officer in 1950 who comes back, and he's a soldier. He comes back and he works for the LAPD in a time when the LAPD is segregated, and he gets an offer to work in internal affairs, this new version of internal affairs within the city of Los Angeles. That's the rough version of it. But I love pitching. Now, I'm probably not the best person to ask about this, because as a director, I just love being able to tell a story. But also, like, as a Black person, I grew up in houses where stories were always being told, always. And I think that's the same for a lot of us, right? It's like, there's just those uncles that tell a great story that make you laugh, and you know what those beats are and what those moments are. And that's how I pitch too. I usually start off with a pitch about something personal about me that relates to the story. And then I get into it through one character. I had this one French film critic, I pitched in this story just randomly, I don't know why, but he said to me, he said, there's a lot going on in your story. Tell me about one person. And that was my thing. That was a terrible accent. But so what I do now is I start with one character, and I try to build out of that. And I do find that when you talk about pitching, if I just tell it to my relatives, to my friends, eventually you see where they lean in, you see where they're fascinated, and then that helps you. And the better you can pitch a story, the more likely you are to get actors attached to be able to do this thing, because essentially people want to be a part of a story that you're passionate about. So my friend and I we were actually going to pitch 2 different things today. And we found that we were more passionate about one of them than the other. And so we just pitched the one we were passionate about. And I say all the time, I could sell anything to anybody if I believe in it. But if I don't believe in it, I have a really hard time selling. And so the key is to pick something that you're passionate about. And then in terms of pitching it, find the things that you gravitate to the most, even if it's one scene or one moment. And then you tie it back to how it relates to you, make it personal, and show the person you're talking to why you're the only person who could be telling the story.
Nice. And then let's say pilot gets picked up, or your script,
Whoa, that's a celebration.
right? Or your script gets optioned, and you're moving toward production. You're in the rewrite process, and people giving you notes. How do you
Yeah.
react to notes? How do you?
Oh, notes. This is being recorded. So, look, if I
think you just said it all.
yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough because there's a lot of really smart people out there that give really, really amazing notes, and those notes are very helpful. And I'm fortunate enough to be working with people right now who give great notes. But I also work with people right now who respond to notes really well. The showrunner of the show that I'm on now knows how to respond to notes. And what he's so great about is seeing what people say is the note behind the note. So sometimes someone gives you a note that they said, this is too long. Well, if it was good, no one would care if it was too long. I mean, on television, you have to fit it in. In fact, my episode's over, but you have to fit within a certain time frame. Like in terms of like a movie, that really means that like maybe I was disinterested at this point. I was like, okay, so when's the point where you stop being enthralled? And they're like, maybe around this point. You go, okay, cool. I need to fix that. I need to find a way to draw you in during that moment. Or if I want to bore you at that point, I need to find a way to bring it back up so you don't feel like the movie's too long. Notes are tough because you have to take the time to respect the person who's giving you the notes, because oftentimes not only are those the people that hold the purse strings, but those are the people who themselves are going to be marketing your film or your TV show. And your job as a writer is to take those notes and address them in a way that satisfies the person, but also continues to satisfy yourself and what makes the story personal. And it is the hardest thing to do in the world, because you're giving birth to a child, then handing it over to someone who says, yeah, I don't really like how you raised the kid. I mean, I like the kid. I don't really like how you raised it. So can you take it home and raise it this way? And you're like, I've been raising this kid for 10 years. They're like, yeah, but you could do better. And you have to humble yourself and go, all right, well, maybe I have to take the kid home and try some new things. And it's tough. It's tough. But the main thing to remember is in that scenario, someone's picked your story up. Someone's paying you to do something, the thing that you love. And you have to keep reminding yourself like, oh man, I get to do this thing that I'm really excited about. Now, look, that's my take on it. My friend whose house that I'm in, he handles notes a lot better than I do. I don't think he takes it as personal. And I think that's the key, is that you want to achieve the ultimate goal is to make the audience feel. So there will be some compromise, there will be some concessions, there's ways to navigate that, but you have to stay true to yourself. And he does a really good job of like listening to notes, taking the notes, changing things while staying true to the things that are most important to him. And I think that's the biggest challenge.
Nice. Let's flip it to the second most difficult thing to do. And let's say that the pilot got picked up, you're in production and you're directing it. So taking it step by step, what are you thinking about when you read it the first time? What are you thinking about when you read it the second time? What's your process of breaking it down from the beginning to the end?
Robert, I got to tell you, directing is the best. It is the best. It's not the easiest, but it's the best thing ever. So it's like having to rewrite a script is hard, but directing is like heavenly. Someone on set asked me on Animal Kingdom, was like, if you could have any job in the world, what would it be? And I said, this. And they were like, oh, you're just being political. And I'm like, no, like for real, like my whole life I've been trying to do this, right? And then, so I guess in answer to your question, I'll just go through it really quickly. You get the script. you read it. Some people read it all the way through and just to get through it and have an understanding of what the intention is. For me, as I'm reading it through, I'm kind of like trying to see around the corners and see what the characters are feeling, all that stuff. Then I go back through and I break down all the scenes and the character's intention. And then based on the visual aspect of the show, I try to think about where I would put the camera in relation to that. Now, if I've seen what that set looks like, if the show already exists and I've seen that set, then I can envision what that is. Sometimes I just draw a rectangle and I just go, okay, if I put the camera here and then move it here, here's how I would have the conversation. This person walks in, talks to this person leaves. And I know I'm going through this very quickly, but regardless of what the show is, this is the same exercise. So for example, like as students, what you can do is you could find a scene of your favorite television show or movie, and then you could play the scene out in your apartment and try to get to the same emotional effect. And that's what I do. Even before I've seen the set, regardless of the location, because the location gets picked later, I plot out where I want to put the camera. And then when I see the location, that all gets thrown out. But what I've already done is I've come to understand how I want to enter the scene, what I want the audience to see first, and what I want them to feel based off of where I put the camera. And that becomes flexible based off of where the location is. Because I already know the intent of all the camera and the characters. So you get the script. Just do you want me to talk about like the meetings and how things work and all that stuff? Okay, so just get the script, you read the script. Hopefully you get the script early. A lot of times in TV you don't, but you get the script on time, you get the script early, you prep it on your own. Then you go into a meeting, and in that first meeting, oftentimes they're just kind of reading through the thing, but sometimes they want to know what you think. And you're like, I just got this last night. Well, it's your job once you get it the night before to read it immediately and have ideas on it. That's what you're getting paid for. And they're not paying you minimum wage, they're paying you more than that. So you got to know. And so the fine line you have to walk is you have to defer a lot to how the show exists and to the writers, because the writers have been working their butt off in the room to try and get the characters to a certain point. And you have to respect that. You're just some guy or girl who just came in for this one episode. So what I try to do is try to do a lot of listening at first. And what's funny about the lot of listening thing, when you're new like to TV, like I am, like on a second episode, I feel like I'm new to TV, but like I've been on TV sets so much because from the writing standpoint, but whatever, when people think you're new, a lot of the listening and the question asking will allow people to think you're naive. And they're like, oh, this person doesn't know what he wants. Well, you have to constantly weigh the balance of listening, learning, but then also being able to assert yourself in the places that you want. And it's a tough thing. And that's a thing that I kind of like wrestle with, right? Like you have to figure it out. But I would rather listen a lot at the beginning, weigh in when asked, because I have an opinion on everything already, right? But I don't know if my opinion is necessarily what they want. I just need to listen first, and then I can gauge it, and then I can start weighing in on my opinion slowly. I can ask, hey, what do you think about this? I won't necessarily do it, but I need to ask. So what happens in television and pre-production is you have all the meetings with all the departments. You meet with the stunt people, you meet with the visual effects people, you meet with your production design, your wardrobe people. Oftentimes you meet with your cinematographer, you get to start planning out all these shots. And you meet with the producers, line producers, you find out the schedule. And most importantly, you meet with your AD, who needs to get an understanding of all the things that you want to do surrounding all these departments. Your AD is your assistant director, and that's the person that's kind of like your right-hand man or woman who's going to be there taking care of you throughout the process. They have your back. They have a better understanding of how the show works than you ever will, hopefully. And they can kind of guide you through just how it works. So anyways, you work through all that stuff, you have these meetings, and then throughout, if there's more things that come out outside of those meetings, like if a meeting I had on day 2 of prep is different than what I want to do on day 7, then the AD helps me have more of those meetings. So you have more of those meetings. So by the time you get to set, everyone should know what you want to do from a visual standpoint, from a sound standpoint, how you want things to move, what it seems to feel like roughly. And then when you get there, you interact with the actors in a way that hopefully guide the scenes to those intent. And again, things pop up. Actors have concerns and questions and those kind of things, and you work with those. again, trying to shape it to what you feel is the best presentation of what the writer has put on the page and what the producers and showrunner want to see and executive producers want to see from the show. You are carrying out someone else's vision using the skills that you have crafted throughout your life, right? And then you show up every day early, and try to show up early, and you are prepared. You know what you want to do with each scene, and then you start having conversations with people where instead of telling them what to do, say, hey, put the camera over there and do this stuff, you find a way to say it so that you always let people know that you're open to ideas. And I think when you're confident, you can do that. I think a lot of that, again, can be perceived by people as weakness. And I will tell you, I'm very different on a film set than I am. Oh, yeah, I'll talk about that, Tom. I'm very different on a film set than I am on a TV set. On a film set, I will say, put the camera over there. On a TV set, I'll be like, so what do you guys think about if we start over here? It's the same thing. It's just said in a different way. And when I say it that way, asking a question, it gives the DP a chance to say, I'd rather start over here. And you go, okay, because ultimately you just want to accomplish what you want from the scene. And you want them to be able to provide the best input so that these amazing people are giving their best work. Whereas in film, as the director, it's more of a dictatorship from the standpoint that like people really want to know what your vision is, and you should have planned this out beforehand, and you know to put the camera right there. And that's what you do. Now, I still want the opinion of my cinematographer, but it's much more direct because it's all coming from me, not from a showrunner or writer, whatever. Typical day on set. What you do is when you show up on set, and you guys should run your shoots the same way too. You show up and you do kind of like a little talk through of the scene. So you read the lines without acting. Sometimes people want to act it out, but you just kind of read them out for this specific scene. Then you go, okay, cool. Let's put it up on its feet. Everyone's just kind of standing. And when I say everyone, this is an intimate read through with just your actors and your AD and you. And then you're in this space and you say, okay, here was what I was thinking. I would love if you would come through this door here and then maybe meet them there. How does that feel? Does that make sense to you? Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. Let's try it like that. Then they do it with a little bit of acting and they do those things and they hit those marks and you go, actually, at this point, I think it'd be great if you turn your back on him and you walk down. Okay, cool. Let's try that. You do it. You do these things. Then the actors they're like, actually, I think it would be better if I stood over here. Well, why? Oh, because if I stand over here, then he blocks my way and then I have to find my way around him. Okay, great. Collaborative process, talking with them, finding those things. But again, you have your intention, you know what you want. So if that doesn't interfere with that, or if that interferes with that, you say, I actually would prefer if you didn't do that. Try this and see if that feels right. It's a way of negotiating. And then after you figure out what you want to do in your rehearsal, and all this stuff happens pretty fast. You figure out what you want in your rehearsal, you do a rehearsal in which everybody comes in who are the heads of departments or everybody that needs to watch it watches that same rehearsal that you've kind of done. And that rehearsal is like 50% in terms of acting, 70% maybe. But really it's them going through the emotions so that the stand-ins can watch all this stuff or that the camera people can watch all this stuff. And so then your actors go back and they hang out and they study their lines, they read their books, they do what they're doing, and the crew starts working. And the crew starts setting up the lights so that it looks right when they hit this mark. The background people, get placed in wherever they go. The camera people line up so they can get the first shot. You talk to your DP about, I'd like to start here and then maybe end here. And you work your way through the scene. Some people start with the wide and then get in closer. Most people do. Sometimes you want to figure out, you want to shoot out a certain actor first because you realize that another actor starts giving better performances around the third or fourth take. So, and it sounds like a lot, but like, it's funny because I've talked to other students about this. Like, how do you know all this stuff? Like, how do you know when to do this? And really it goes back to riding the bus. If you sit on, anybody on this chat who sat on the bus, if you sit on the bus and just watch and listen, you know who the wild people are on the bus. You know that when you see the other guy getting on with his bike, you know that this lady is going to be upset at this guy. You just know it's going to happen. And you watch, you get these interactions, right? And you see them coming. And that's kind of what you do as a director. And so you try to predict what those situations are. And then after everything's set up, you bring the actors back, and sometimes you do a quick rehearsal. Most of the time you do, but other times you just want to shoot it. You say, let's give it a try. And it depends on where you're at with your day and how much time you have left. But you do it. And the first time's a little rough. Maybe someone's not into it. Maybe the camera was a little slow to get from point A to point B. And maybe the plane was going overhead. You do it again. And you keep doing it, whittling it down until you see all the pieces. And as a director, I'm always thinking of how this is going to edit, right? So I'm thinking like, all right, so he didn't really get the line in the wide, but she did. So why don't I could start with her in this wide stuff, and then I could go to the close of him. So I got to make sure when we get the close up that he really nails that line, because he didn't really get it in the wide. So you're putting this together. And as you're doing this, hopefully, and this is something I needed to do a better job of on Animal Kingdom, was like you're saying to your script supervisor who's making notes on all this stuff and like what's being covered, and you turn to them and go, in take 1, I liked his performance. In take 3, I liked her performance. And in take 1, I loved how they came in the door. So then they can tell the editor all those things, and maybe the editor can use all those pieces, maybe not, but at least they have the notes. And then you go through your day, knocking all those scenes out as best you can based on the plan that you've already developed. And at the end of the day, when everyone is darn near exhausted and tired of hearing your voice, much like many of you guys probably are in the Zoom with me, then you finish up your shots, you go home, and then you come back the next day and do it all over. But it's pretty fun. The best part about it is that when you sit by a monitor, you get to be the very first audience for any television show. When you're watching it, you're literally like, you might as well be at home on your couch. And you get to be the first to experience that, which is dope. It's like the best thing ever. So yeah, and you say, what time is early? It all depends. It depends on what the light needs to look like and what you're doing. And oftentimes the way that it works in television is because there's a thing called a turnaround. They don't want to work people too hard because union rules want to keep people safe. And thank goodness for the union keeping people safe. So that if you finish at 10 p.m., they're not asking you to come back and work at 4 a.m. without enough sleep. Hopefully you end at 10, you're not starting before 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock the next day. You want to make sure that everyone's well rested, they've gotten home safe, they didn't, put themselves so they can get into an accident. And so what happens with a film schedule, oftentimes it's a television schedule, it's built to start early. And as the week progresses and the days get longer, if you have a 12, 14-hour day, if you start, for example, you go 6 to 6, then the next day you could start like at 7, something like that. But if you go 6 to 8, then the next day you have to start at like 8:30 or 9. And slowly throughout the week, you get later and later and later, and then you have your night shoots. Yeah, so it answers that question. I feel like this is a lot of like deep level stuff, but I think by having this understanding, if your first job is being a PA on set, you'll know these things that I didn't know when I was starting out, So hopefully this is helpful.
It's super helpful. I mean, to be honest with you, like Allie is on, just joined us, and she's running our camp programs where we're like, I think I explained to you, we do like production virtually, and then pre-production virtually, production in person, and then post. And, that's what they're doing in their production days. And a lot of what you just described is kind of how we try to run it, so that they're, obviously on a different scale, but that's really important to understand that. And I also think just like what you said about like the union is so important. I mean, that's keeping not just actors safe, but everybody, the entire crew, everybody who's doing these jobs, because they're hard jobs, they're fun, they're awesome, and they're also a lot of work, very focused.
I've worked on a lot of non-union things. I've worked on non-union features. I've worked on non-union commercials. I was an electrician on a commercial, and I showed up and the wires were frayed on the lights, and they were like, just plug them in. I'm like, I'm not plugging these in, and I'm not going to let anyone else plug them in. And they're like, well, this is a non-union job. And I'm like, yeah, but no one's dying today, so we're not doing this. So I'll take everybody with me, like if we have to. But and I've worked on features where they want you to drive home, and I'm like, no, you got to put these people up. And the only reason I I can say those things is because I had those days where I drove through the middle of the night and then like was waking up as I was driving, and I was like, all this to make a movie? Like, I shouldn't be risking my life for this, you know? You have to cherish your crew and your people. One thing I wanted to say that I didn't say before was like, I'm talking about stuff from the directing standpoint. It's important to understand how like certain chains work. So as the director, I talk to the cinematographer and I say, I want it to feel like this. And the cinematographer goes, oh, okay, cool. I'm gonna have the light source come from there. And I go, oh, cool, that's great. Then I leave. Then the cinematographer says to his gaffer, I think we should put the source light out there. And then says to the key grip, like, maybe we block it here because we don't want too much going in. Then the cinematographer leaves. Then the gaffer goes to his team and says, okay, put up this light or this light. And then the key grip goes to her team and says, hey, bring me in this stand. And the more that that gets passed on, the more detailed it gets. So that by the end, they're saying, they're bringing the light panel here, angle it down, and then put up a silk in front of this, or put up 216 in front of this. And what's great is, as a cinematographer or as a director, if you do all those jobs, you understand how much time that takes to do this, and you understand how hard everyone works, so that you're not just the dude going, hey, make it look good, and then you walk out and you come back in like, hey, this doesn't look good. It's like, people worked hard on it. And it helps you understand when to insert yourself too. Because then you, like, if you see it going down a road that you don't necessarily like, you could say, hey, before we get too deep into this, can we just move all this here? Because I've worked on commercials. I was a gaffer on a commercial where the set was painted. We had talent on set. This guy showed up late. He walked up and he was like, this is the wrong color. The lights are in the wrong place. And we were like, you mother, where have you been for the last 5 hours? And he was at his hotel chilling. No one respected his ass. So like, you have to be considerate of the work that goes into it. And the best way you can do that is by doing all the positions, working all the positions.
As we're kind of closing out, if anybody has any questions, please bring them forward. But before we go, Aric, I wonder if you might touch on post, your role in editing.
Yeah, it's funny because as someone who edited a lot, like editing was the thing that when I started working, I think the first thing I got paid a decent amount of money to edit was a promo for Jennifer Lopez's clothing line. And it was a job that allowed me to quit my job because I was going to make more in a night than I was going to make in like a month, because it was so last minute. They're like, we'll just pay any dummy to do it. And I just happened to be that dummy. And so it's interesting because I cut a lot. And like my last feature, I did the director's cut myself. And so the thing that I always wrestle with is, you have to find a way to speak to your editor. First of all, everyone should edit. Like, you can go to the public library and then try the trial of Adobe Premiere, download it, and you can use it for 30 days and then kind of teach yourself. And there's programs that teach you how. You gotta learn. You gotta, wherever you can. And it sounds like you guys have resources. You should do it, even if you don't want to be an editor, because you have to be able to understand timing and time. And you can't be a good storyteller if you don't understand timing. And so the thing that I had to learn, Robert, was just like how to communicate with an editor so that I wasn't telling them how to do their job, that I was giving them the freedom to express themselves. And that's the thing that, like, I try to be mindful of with all stuff, and I struggle with sometimes. Sometimes I would just say, get out of my way, let me do it. But that's not effective for anybody. So in terms of editing, like on Animal Kingdom, I had like this incredible editor, sorry. So I could just say like, hey, I'd love for it to feel this, and I want it to play this way. And then other times I had specific notes. It'd be great if we cut right on this thing, because it was a dream that I had, not a dream, but how I had envisioned it. And so what's important is that you can be exact in detail, but you're still, like any other position, giving someone the flexibility to express their creativity too, because they may discover something in the process. If you don't like it, you could always change it. And fortunately now, y'all live in a world where a change in editing really is just about like sliding something or hitting Command Z and you can go back. When I was learning editing to sound like that old dude, you would cut this out of the film. And once you cut it, it was cut. So you like to add another frame onto it was just a hot mess. It was crazy. You had to like tape it together. It was terrible. It was a terrible way to work, but that's how movies were made for a long time. So just for post, it's important to know what you want. Give your editor the freedom to do, you know, to create something, let them do their pass, but then be very specific about how you want the changes and do the work yourself in terms of like going through the takes and the options so that you're not asking them to do something that's impossible. But be willing to, another thing in post and posts with notes and stuff is be willing to try something that was outside of your plan. You have to be flexible.
And when you were discussing the shooting of the scene, you were imagining how to assemble it in your head. Is that when the editing process starts to gel for you, or do you have ideas prior to that moment?
Well, what happens is if you're an editor, if you've edited before and you're on set, you start thinking of the thing as an edit, and then it helps you see which shots you need, right? So like what I'll do is like I'll make a plan, and then I'll think of it as an editor and be like, ooh, I need the shot to connect those two moments. So you come up with another shot. And so you craft the story in coverage beforehand, but then when you're shooting it, you like to think as an editor because you know you're going to need to be able to, it's like, again, the cooking analogy, you need to have the right ingredients. And if you give the editor, you want them to make a cake and there's no flour, you got to figure out like how to you got to get the flour. You got to figure out a way. Even if you're running low on time, you just, got to figure it out.
And were you involved with the editing of your features?
Oh, no doubt. I'm in there all the time.
And
it's because I love it. It's what I want to do. You know what I mean? Like I want to see all of it. And I would, like on American Gun, when my talented editor was done working for the day, I would stay and work on the sound mix by myself. And I would draw sounds from places. I would take CD sounds and lay them in, because what I wanted to do was, by the time it went to the sound mixers, I wanted there to be a base level of what the soundtrack should sound like. So you always, again, it's your child. You want to make the thing as best as possible. So yeah, you try to be involved. I will say, like on Animal Kingdom, most of the time is I would watch and I would just give the notes, and then they would respond in a way that it was like amazing. I was like, oh, they got it. It's great. And so I could trust them to do that. I didn't have to be in there for the whole time. And because of my schedule right now, I was very fortunate that the post-producer, Terry, was able to make time for that with Ian and made that happen. But I guess here's the better answer. Instead of like on features, I always want to be there. But like on television stuff, you have a certain amount of allotted hours. You should use those hours. But the whole goal is to come up with the best show to present to the showrunner, who then presents it to the audience at some point. So you're there as much as you feel like you need to be. If I had felt like I wasn't conveying the notes properly to the editors and I need to be there more, I would have been there more. You know?
Sure.
But they were great.
Yeah, one of the most important lessons I feel that I've learned in my experience was everybody's just wants the opportunity to do their best work on the film set. You know, everybody, like I remember as an AD just saying, oh no, we're not going to do that. We're moving on to this scene, forget that. And I just see their hearts break and their faces just fall. And I realize, oh my gosh, I just like ruined their whole day. And, you know, your message of empathy toward the crew and toward the characters in the story and toward the actors, I think really hits home. And I think it carries well beyond the film industry and will certainly help anybody out within the industry. Is there anything that you'd like to say to wrap up? Any last minute questions or comments from anybody on the Zoom?
The last thing I'll say is if this is what you really want to do, find a way to do it. If you're not sure, you may want to find something else, because it's really hard to get into. And then once you do, you should dive in with both feet if you get the opportunity. And there's no job that's below you in terms of like, what would you do to make money so that you can do your thing? Hustle, do all this stuff. I mean, Everyone says they waited tables. I waited tables. I waited tables after I made my first feature. Think about that. I had a film with 3 Academy Award winners in it. I was nominated for awards. While I was waiting tables, I took a Saturday off so that I can go to an award show where I was on TV. And my friends were texting me. They were like, "We didn't know you did this." And I was like, "Yeah, because I didn't talk to you fools about it." And you do whatever you can, and you hustle, and then you surround yourself with people who believe in you, who empower you, like your family and your friends. Like, and they're not going to get it. They're going to doubt you, but you got to find the people who are your common tribe. Work on other people's stuff, help other people, respect other people, learn from your friends. How bad a job is this where your homework is watching movies and TV? It's the best. Like, that's literally was my homework for Animal Kingdom, was watching Animal Kingdom. That's pretty good. It's a damn good show. It was good. So that's all. Thank you for the time. Oh, read the book Shot by Shot. You should all get that. There's another book called Making Movies by Sidney Lumet. You should get that. A lot of people swear by this other book called Save the Cat. It's about writing. And then there's this other book that I like called Who the Devil Made It. And it's interviews with Peter Bogdanovich with some of the greatest filmmakers of all time. And you just learn about how they work, that I think is really interesting. And so all those are the main books that I would suggest.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Aric. It's been fabulous, and I'm always learning, like you say, and I learned a lot, and I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you guys for making the time, for asking me, and for listening to me run my mouth for a little bit. Thank you.
Oh, it was amazing. Thank you so much. I mean, I learned a lot. I know everybody here, you're getting lots of thank yous in the chat. We're really grateful. And just so much of it was just new information, things that reaffirmed, validated things. Thank you. You're amazing. And I appreciate you.
Thank you. And if you guys have more questions, like, email them to me, like, for real.
Okay.
Just, this doesn't stop. So, because I want to look up and be like, ooh, Rosie made this movie. I remember Elizabeth Hewlett. Like, I remember these people. So email me,
Sure.
ask me the questions as much as I can help. I will. But yeah, make some good stuff. Try things. Don't be scared. Now's the time.
Now is the time. I know that's what we keep telling everybody. Well, yeah, we have a couple of things. If you wanted to join us on July 10th, the pilots are being read. 10 pages of each pilot is being read by a table read with actors. And then July 20th, we have our docuseries or pitching. They're doing 2-minute pitches. So you're welcome to come to those, but we could also send you questions and stuff too. So thank you for that invitation.
Yeah, please send me a link to that. And I will say, like, in your writing, say less. I know this is stupid from a guy who said everything I said, but when you're writing a scene, just say less. Don't let the actors don't have to tell you everything they feel, because sometimes when you write a lie for them to say, it says more than the truth. So think about it.
Isn't that the truth? Wow. Thank you. And thanks, Robert. That was beautiful. I have to say, this Animal Kingdom crew, these are like beautiful human beings. I'm just so grateful to all of you. You're all so fantastic. And of course, we thank the California Film Commission for making this happen, because we couldn't do it without them. And everybody who showed up, thank you. And thanks to everybody who's watching. And we'll see you actually next week. We're going to talk to, tell us, Robert, who are we talking to next week?
So we're talking with Ian Tan, one of the editors.
Oh, great.
One of the editors on Animal Kingdom, and his assistant, Chris Visser. Ian is a writer and director in his own right. So Aric, you worked with Ian?
Yeah, he's amazing. You guys are lucking out. He's really good. Fantastic. He's really good.
Awesome.
Great instincts, and he's great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, thank you.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Robert. Thanks. Hey, Amber. Bye.